जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानन्दन ब्रज जनरञ्जन। यशोदानन्दन ब्रज जनरञ्जन। यमुनतीरा वनचारी। यमुनतीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानन्दन ब्रज जनरञ्जन। यशोदानन्दन ब्रज जनरञ्जन। यमुनतीरा वनचारी। यमुनतीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandanam Brajajanaranjanam Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Privrajakacharya Ashodarshata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Privrajakacharya Ashodarshata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Excuse me. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Mathura Vrindavana Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Yamuna Mayi Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Aishvaram Shastram Utsrajya Bandha Mokshanudarshanam Vivikta Padam Ajnaya Kim Asat Karmabhir Bhavet Aishvaram Shastram Utsrajya Bandhamokshanudarshanam Viviktapadam Ajnaya Kimasat Karmabhir Bhavet Aishvaram Shastram Utsrajya Bandhamokshanudarshanam Viviktapadam Ajnaya Kimasat Karmabhir Bhavet Aishvaram Shastram Utsrajya Bandhamokshanudarshanam Viviktapadam Ajnaya Kimasat Karmabhir Bhavet Mataji's.
Hare Krishna.
Hold on.
Okay, on Zoom.
Aishwaryam Shastramurtsrujya Bandhamokshanudarshanam Vivikta Padamagnaya Kimasatkarma Bhirbhavet. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Aishwaram Shastram Utritya Bandha Moksha Nudarshanam Vivikta Padam Agyaya Kim Asat Karma Bhavet.
Aishwaram, bringing understanding of God or Krishna consciousness. Shastram, the Vedic literature. Utsrajya, giving up. Bandha, of bondage. Moksha, and of liberation. Anudarshanam, informing about the ways. Viviktapadam, distinguishing spirit from matter. Ajnaya, not knowing. Kimasat karma bhi bhavet, what can be the use of temporary fruitive activities? Translation. Narada Muni had spoken of a swan. That swan is explained in this verse. The Vedic literatures, Shastras, vividly describe how to understand the Supreme Lord, the source of all material and spiritual energy. Indeed, they elaborately explain these two energies. The swan, Hamsa, is one who discriminates between matter and spirit, who accepts the essence of everything, and who explains the means of bondage and the means of liberation. The words of scriptures consist of variegated vibrations. If a foolish rascal leaves aside the study of these Shastras to engage in temporary activities, what will be the result? Purport. The Krishna consciousness movement is very eager to present Vedic literature in modern languages, especially Western languages such as English, French, and German. The leaders of the Western world, the Americans and Europeans, have become the idols of modern civilization because the Western people are very sophisticated in temporary activities for the advancement of material civilization. A sane man, however, can see that all such grand activities, although perhaps very important for temporary life, have nothing to do with eternal life. The entire world is imitating the materialistic civilization of the West, and therefore the Krishna consciousness movement is very much interested in giving the Western people knowledge by translating the original Sanskrit Vedic literatures into Western languages. The word Vivikta Padam refers to the path of logical discourses concerning the aim of life. If one does not discuss that which is important in life, one is put into darkness and must struggle for existence. What then is the benefit of his advancement in knowledge? The people of the West are seeing their students become hippies, despite gorgeous arrangements for university education. The Krishna consciousness movement, however, is trying to convert misguided, drug-addicted students to the service of Krishna and engage them in the best welfare activities for human society. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Shreshtham Manamapi Shachiputramatra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupurim Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuve evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, one thing that all living entities have in common, living entities have many things in common, but the major thing that they have in common, or at least the relevant thing to this purport, is that we all die. Of course, the living entity itself doesn't die, but the living entity in a particular body, the body dies. So this is a somewhat unpleasant fact for most people to think about. My Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami, was mentioning that he made this, it's a very simple point, and even materialistic people acknowledge it, that we all die. But my Guru Maharaj was mentioning that he made this point in a talk in England, and everybody in the audience became very upset. And similarly, he also said that he made the point in a train. He was speaking to some people in a train, and all he said was we're all going to die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Saying nothing of what you're supposed to do with that information, just putting it out there that, hey, we're going to die. And yeah, the people in the train said, why are you saying this? Why are you speaking these things? You shouldn't talk like this. They became upset. So if you think about it you don't have to think about it very much, but from a non-Vaishnava perspective and from the perspective of materialistic people, this fact of death is really quite unpleasant. And that's an understatement. It's horrible, because what do materialistic people, their conception is that we should get as much material enjoyment as we can in this life, build up our, like Prabhupada's saying in this purport, they're building up they're becoming very sophisticated in temporary activities for the advancement of material civilization. So people, they build up a family, they build up a home, they gather all these possessions, which are not bad in and of themselves, those things. But and they have this whole idea of who they are. They have this whole situation going, this whole life. And death basically kind of pulls the rug out from under that whole thing. The foundation of all of their enjoyment, what to speak of enjoyment, even just their existence, anything that they, can conceive of, is predicated on them being alive. But this fact of death, it kind of pulls the rug out from under that whole thing. And it really shakes one to think about it, to think that everything that I can conceive of right now, everything that I'm experiencing, all those things that I have, the happiness that I'm feeling now, all of that is going to go away one day. That's a very unpleasant fact, and from the perspective of somebody who has no knowledge of Krishna, for somebody, what to speak of even Krishna, if somebody has no knowledge of there being anything else but just this one life, it's very depressing, and it paints this image of the world as being very cold and dead and lifeless. So therefore, people don't want to think about it. People don't want to acknowledge, beyond just lip service, the fact that they're going to die. I remember discussing when I was first joining, or when I was first kind of coming to Krishna consciousness. I remember discussing with my mother, and my mother's a very nice lady, and she's very thoughtful, and so is my father. But I remember this one particular instance that kind of gave me some realization. I was discussing with my mother, and I was saying, well, one day I'm going to die, and I don't know. I don't see the point of doing all this, going through all these different things in this life if at the end of the life it's just going to be, taken away at death. I'm just trying to prepare for death. And my mother said that, she just said, you're thinking too much. Life's not that complicated. So, people without a conception of God or anything like that, it's an unpleasant thing to think about, therefore they don't think about it. But like this purport is saying, a sane man, however, can see that all such grand activities, perhaps very important for temporary life, have nothing to do with eternal life. So somebody who's thoughtful, somebody who has, even just basic common sense, they see past the, you could say, the grandeur or the, shiny kind of exterior of material life, because they can see that it's all temporary. Kimasat karma bhir bhavet. What's the use? It's all temporary. Like Dharma Setu Prabhu gave the example in class, not yesterday, 2 days ago. If I offer to give you $100 or $1,000 or whatever large amount of money, and then I say, you can have this, but at the end of class, you have to give it back to me. It's not such a good deal. You don't really get to do anything with it. You couldn't buy anything. You couldn't. There's no point. You can't actually enjoy the thing, because you have to give it back. You're going to lose it one day. So it's the same thing with this life. It's difficult to enjoy life. It's difficult to really get into it if you understand that at the end everything's going to be taken away. So what's the use? What's the use of beginning an activity if you know that the result is going to be bad, or the result is going to be nothing? So therefore, one who is like a hamsa, a swan, paramahamsa, they distinguish between matter and spirit. They distinguish between that which should be done and that which should not be done. And therefore, they discuss what's going to happen. They think about what's going to happen at the time of death. The Bhagavad Gita's perspective about the time of death is yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram. That whatever one thinks of at the time of death, then that he attains. So whatever momentum one has developed, in this life, because what you're thinking of at the time of death, your consciousness at the time of death is made by your consciousness during your life. It's not that you can be a rascal your whole life, immersed in, like for example, if somebody's addicted to, I don't know, smoking cigarettes or something. Somebody's addicted to smoking cigarettes. They've developed that momentum, and the longer you smoke, the harder it is to give it up. So, in a similar way, the longer you're engaged in sense gratification, the more immersed you are in sense gratification, then to that degree, it'll be more difficult to think of Krishna at the time of death, or to think of something else besides that at the time of death. So, therefore, most people who are kind of absorbed in material subjects, they have to come back to this material world. They have to get a new body, new material body, and they continue the activities according to the momentum that they developed in their previous life. Prabhupada tells one story that there was a prime minister of India, I think it was of India. There was a prime minister, and he left his body, and then one astrologer, he did his chart or whatever, and then somebody asked about his, where he was now, or at the time after he had left. And so this astrologer, he did his chart or whatever, and he looked and he found, well, what he said was that there's a man in Sweden who has 2 dogs, and one of them is the prime minister. So, and similarly also one time Srila Prabhupada, they were getting a building in London, I think it was. And they opened the door and they went inside, and a rat ran across the room. And Prabhupada pointed with his cane, he said that was the previous owner of the building. Because if one is attached to this material world, if one is attached to whatever one's attached to, then they come back. So for example, if one is attached to their home, if one is attached to their family, oftentimes, for example, like a father, he'll come back, he's very attached to his son, he's very attached to his family, so he comes back as the son of his son. And they stay in the same family. Or if somebody's attached to their home, I think it was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, Prabhupada mentioned that the previous owner of Bhaktivedanta Manor is very attached to his home, so he's there, living there as a ghost. So yeah, one can come back as a ghost, or one can come back as a rat in the in the building. Sometimes there's this possum we see on the patio. It's a regular. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he's an old brahmachari. Maybe he was maybe he was a member of the Elks Lodge. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Balaram was saying that maybe the possum was an old brahmachari who didn't like getting up early, so he stays out at night. But he's very friendly, actually. He's not, anyway. So the result of people's absorption in sense gratification is that they have to come back. They come back to this material world. They come back in some form of life. But the thing is, if somebody doesn't have developed consciousness, means if they're just thinking along the lines of like a dog, what are dogs thinking of? Dogs just eating and sleeping and trying to get ahead, trying to be the alpha male. Like I've heard the example given, like in India, sometimes at night you see like 5 or 6 dogs in like a pack. I remember I was walking in Vrindavan at night, and it was actually a pretty big pack of dogs, and they were all barking, and they were on the road there, and nobody else was there. It was just me, and then all these dogs passed by. They were all barking and making a lot of noise. So, the dogs, they don't have, during the day they don't have any jurisdiction really, because they'll just get shooed away, or they'll stones thrown at them or something. But at night, when that's when they have their that's their chance to really kind of assert their dominance. So if somebody has this mentality, then they can come back like that. They can come back as a dog, or they can come back as some other undeveloped form of life. If you don't have developed consciousness, then there's no need of having if you're not focused on developing your consciousness, then there's no point of having developed consciousness. Because the human form of life, which is the only form of life who has developed consciousness, is meant for understanding real truth, understanding the real value of life. Labdhasu durlabhamidam bahusam bhavante manushyam nityam api hadhira turnam yateta napateta numrityu yavan nishreyasai vishayakala sarvatasyat. This human form of life, having obtained this human form of life, labdhasu durlabham, which is very difficult to very difficult to obtain, idam bahusam bhavante, and is only obtained after many, many, many lives. Bahusam bhavante. Manushyam arthadam nityam api hadhira. This human form of life is able to give artha, is able to give real value, give one real benefit, even though it's anitya, even though it's temporary. Api hadhira. Therefore, one who is sober-minded, not bewildered by sense gratification. Turnam yateta napateta numrityu yavan. Then while this body hasn't died, napated, one immediately, turnam yateta napatet anumrityu yavan, tries to understand their real benefit, understand ultimate benefit, shreyas. Because this sense gratification is available in all different forms of life. But this human form of life is specifically meant for understanding the absolute truth. Therefore, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. So, one who is intelligent, if they want to know the real goal of life, they'll find somebody else who knows. They'll find that person who knows, and they'll inquire from them. They'll serve them. Because that person who has understood the real goal of life can give that knowledge to others. But we see nowadays there's so many gurus. There's so many people who are claiming to have understood the goal of life. Like there was one who, he said that what you do is you write a check made out to yourself for $1 million, and then you stick it on your fridge with a magnet. And so every time you go to your fridge, because people are always going to their fridge, trying to find something to eat, and you see this check written $1 million for Mr. John or whatever, and then you think, yeah, $1 million, yeah, okay, check made out to me for $1 million. That's going to be that's going to be mine one day. And you meditate on it, and eventually you manifest it. And you actually get that $1 million. Of course, maybe you will, but probably not in this life, maybe in the next life, after going through 8.4 million different species of life, then maybe you'll have $1 million. But, yeah, but by that time it'll be like 1 million yen, which is not worth very much. So who's qualified? Who actually knows? How can we understand that somebody understands the absolute truth? Bhagavatam says, Tasmad gurum prabadyeta jignasashraya uttamam shabde parechernishnatam brahmanyupashamashrayam. That one should surrender to a guru who has understood shabde pare, who has understood spiritual sound vibration, who has understood the words of the Supreme Lord, and brahmanyupashamashrayam, and has taken shelter of that Supreme Lord. So a guru is not somebody who concocts their own process, who makes their own process, who gives their own ideas. A guru, a real guru, is a representative of the Lord, and the Lord reveals himself through the medium of Shastra. There's a verse, anyway, I'm not going to remember it. There's a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita to the effect that seeing the suffering of the conditioned souls, Krishna very mercifully gives the Vedas and the Puranas. Krishna gives Shastra so that the souls can liberate themselves. Just like if you get like a bookshelf from IKEA or something, it comes with instructions. Because without the instructions, you just have a bunch of pieces of wood and some screws or whatever. So how can you understand, or something more complicated, you could probably figure out how to put a bookshelf together, but if you have like a desk or like a chair or something like that, it's kind of difficult you can't really just make sense of it without instructions. So Shastra is like the instruction manual for the material world. Krishna sends souls to the material world if they desire to be there. But then he gives the instruction manual. Okay, when you want to get out, here's how you do it. And so Shastra is the center of everything. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 20, verse number 352, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that Shastra is the center of everything because a guru, there's Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, which are generally understood as the main three pramanas for Vaishnavas, which is true, but they're not all equally weighted. Actually, Prabhupada says Shastra is the center because Guru and Sadhu should speak according to Shastra, and if they don't, then they lose their qualification as Guru and Sadhu. Not that they give their own ideas. So there's many Shastras that say different things, like I think it says in the purport here. Anyway, whatever it is. There's many different Shastras, and they all sometimes seem to be saying different things. Like, for example, the Upanishads seem to be explaining the impersonal aspect of the Lord. Or the Tamasic Puranas seem to be explaining, talking that Shakti is supreme, or that Shiva is supreme. And so there's so many Shastras, and of course Karmakanda, and all these yagyas and pujas to perform so that you can get punya and you can go to Swarga Loka and enjoy for some time. There's so many Shastras that are all saying these different things. But a real guru knows the essence of all Shastra. Yavanartha udapane sarvata samtutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanataha. That just like a big well of water can serve all the purposes of a small well, so those brahmanas who understand the essence of the Vedas, they serve all the various purposes of all the Vedic literatures, the subsidiary Vedic literatures. So if we surrender to a spiritual master who knows the essence, then we don't have to go through all the different processes in the Vedas. Then we can just go straight to that essence and attain the highest goal of life. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, what is the essence? Vedesha sarvaira ham eva vedyaha. That throughout all the Vedas, there's so many different statements, so many different processes, so many different... but of all those Vedas, I am to be known, Krishna says. So, the Srimad Bhagavatam is that Vedic literature which is wholly and solely dedicated to discussing the glories, extolling the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, in his original form, and of delineating that process by which to worship him, by which to come back to him. Dharmav projita kaitavotra paramo nirmat saranam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate mahamuni krite kim vaparai ishvara sadyo hridya varudyate trikatibishu shushibis takshanat. So this Srimad Bhagavatam it casts out all materialistic religions. Kaitava Dharma. Any kind of materialistic religion means religion for some so-called religion for obtaining some material purpose. Srimad Bhagavatam completely smashes that. And Dharma Projita Kaitavotar Paramo Nirmat Saranam Satam. And it's meant for those who are non-envious, means those who aren't attached to sense gratification, who aren't attached to being the center of the universe, so to speak. Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulanam. It's the essence of the Vedas, and it uproots the threefold miseries. Like if you're pulling weeds, for example, if you just rip the weed out, or if you just tear it, and the root still remains, the weed will just grow back. But the Srimad Bhagavatam, it uproots, means it pulls out the roots of material desire, or the roots of material suffering, which is material desire. Vedyam vasumatra vasu shivadam tapatrayam mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparai Ishvara, because it was composed by Srila Vyasadeva in his maturity, and by hearing it, by rendering submissive oral reception to the sound vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam and trying to imbibe its message, then the Supreme Lord at once, Tat Kshanat, that moment, Kshana is like a moment, that specific moment. So Tat Kshanat, that moment, Kim Vaparai Ishvara Sadhyo Hridya Varudite, that moment, the Lord appears in one's heart. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of the Supreme Lord, and if one hears it and really seriously tries to imbibe its message and understand its message, then the Supreme Lord at once appears in that devotee's heart. What is it? Srinvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantyasto Hyapadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. And when the Supreme Lord appears in one's heart and sees that the devotee is sincerely trying to hear his message and understand him for the purpose of going back home, back to Godhead, then the Lord helps him by cleaning all the dirt out from his heart so that he can remember Krishna at all times. And if one remembers Krishna at all times, then at the time of death, naturally, he'll remember Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead. And this is the goal of life. So, I'll stop there and we can have questions and comments. It's good timing. Okay. Balaram Prabhu.
Why is it here? It should be by you. Just the qualifications of a guru. You mentioned Brahman Upashamashriyam. Upashamashriyam means he's fixed in renunciation. So that's an important qualification, because you may be able to quote all the Shastra, but you're not fixed in renunciation. And then, so you can see that.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Oh, Jessica, did you? Oh, she's good, okay.
It's right here. Hare Krishna. So a quick question about, okay, maybe it's not just a quick question. So like what you're thinking of, what you cultivate through your whole life, that's what you come back as. And if you're cultivating material desires, then you come back as like a possum or whatever. And so you have to cultivate desire to serve Krishna. So I'm wondering about like, it seems like there's some desires that are kind of on the fence. Like for example, I was reading somewhere where some people were saying they wanted to be initiated, but they wanted to be initiated by someone who wasn't allowed to initiate. And so basically they were saying they would rather, they're not going to get initiated this lifetime. They want to come back to get initiated by who they want to get initiated by. So like I would think, so like the desire to get initiated, like surely that's like service of Krishna, but they're saying that they want to come back to be initiated by who. So I'm just wondering if you had any comment on that sort of idea.
Well, I guess it's kind of like Neha Bikramanashosti. So if one begins the process of devotional service, but doesn't finish it, part of finishing it is becoming initiated and surrendering to a spiritual master and then serving that spiritual master. So I guess, if somebody begins the process of devotional service but doesn't finish it in this life, then they can pick up where they left off in the next life. So that's something, I guess I'm thinking.
Very risky proposition.
Yeah.
First of all, if that person is really who they think he was, he or she, they're going to be back to Godhead. So how are they going to get initiated?
That's true. Yeah.
It seems like an impurity in the desire for initiation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's kind of a... Yeah, anyway, that's interesting. Yeah, but that point that, yeah, if this person is really actually a very qualified spiritual master, then when they leave, they're not going to come back, you know? They're not going to like stick around to initiate you in the next life, so...
I guess unless unless they somehow have disciples, other disciples, or they get disciples, and then the disciples don't finish the course, and then they have to come back to for their disciples. It seems like getting complicated.
It's possible, but better probably just to get initiated in this life.
I mean, another thing is like the tendency of a conditioned soul, which means most people, they come up with all different, or you could say a conditioned soul who hasn't made much progress in Krishna consciousness, to be specific. Either or, but conditioned soul or one who hasn't made much progress in Krishna consciousness, the tendency is to come up with all these excuses why I cannot surrender to Krishna. Right? Oh, well, the guru I wanted, he's gone, so now I can't accept another guru. It's an excuse. And it's just avoiding the process of surrender once again. And whoever this is, they think themselves so qualified that they just cannot find any other guru who would be so lucky to have them as a disciple. They should feel that I'm unqualified, I'm fallen. Okay, I would have loved to be initiated by this guru, but it didn't work, so now I still need to surrender. And the process Krishna outlines throughout all the Vedic literatures is to accept a guru. So therefore I need to find a guru, and that shouldn't be so difficult because I'm so fallen and I'm so sinful, and I should be able to find a guru, not that, oh, no one's qualified to be my guru. So now, of course, how deep people are thinking about that particular individual, who knows? But if you could just, there's so many ways to analyze it, but like Dravida Prabhu was saying, it's dangerous because, you're going to wait till that person comes back in your next life. All this, who knows if the person's going to come back, and but a lot of it's just not wanting to surrender, really. Or having a misconception, as Dravida Prabhu said, it's an impurity. Or you said it's an impurity? No, I think Dravida Prabhu. It's an impurity means it's a misconception of the philosophy. This called, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, it's one of the anartas. It's what Tattva Brahma, which means you don't have a clear conception of the philosophy, and therefore you don't act properly based on the philosophy. So, anyways.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Good ISKCON disciple course material.
So it's okay to just say this mentality is completely nonsense.
Yeah.
We have to be desperate to have Krishna in our lives. One thing, the verses about the acharyas being fixed in renunciation and knowledge of the Vedas, they're also desperate to have Krishna in their lives. They're praying, Prabhupada said, like a child calling for its mother. That's not an exaggeration. If we don't come to that point, we're not going to make it. We're going to crash. So, it's not meant to scare us. Whenever Srila Prabhupada talked about Pariksit Maharaj, he said he was given notice of 7 days. We don't have notice of 7 seconds. We don't know how much longer we're going to have. So the desperation to pray like anything to have Krishna in our lives, it's not that the Hare Krishna movement is like a machine and we just join and, it's a place to hang out with nice people who have nice vegetarian food and, I'll just go along for the ride. At some point, it's not just about watching the Acharya be desperate for Krishna. We have to internalize that and ourselves need Krishna in our lives at every breath.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. I have 2 questions. What is the recommended amount of purification required for one to go back to Godhead? And could one's karma prevent one from returning back to Godhead?
Prabhupada said 70%. If you're 70% Krishna conscious, you can go back home back to Godhead. But karma definitely yes. But devotees don't really worry about karma because the process of Krishna consciousness naturally gets rid of karma. So we're worried about developing our love for Krishna, and So if you can do that at least to 70%, we should try to do more. But yeah, we should try to, at every moment, be doing everything for purification, and nothing that, with every action, like there's that verse, Kayena vacha manasandhyarva buddhyatmana vanasrita svabhavat karoti yadyat sakalam parasmai narayanayati samarpayetat. That whatever one does with their mind, their body, words, with their, according to their svabhav, according to their nature, one should think this is for the pleasure of the Lord. This is for the pleasure of Narayana or Krishna. Actually, Sanatana Goswami and Hari Bhakti Vilas says one should recite this verse every night before they go to bed, and have the consciousness of offering all of their activities during the day to Krishna as an offering. And then in that you can think. Huh? Yeah. Well, he also says that you should reflect on which ones on which ones you would like to offer. You offer everything, and then you think like, oh man, probably shouldn't have offered that one. And then for the next day you can kind of, yeah. Is that okay, Cletus? Yeah, you're going to lose the golf the next day. Yeah.
Hare Krishna?
I think Mukunda Charana Prabhu has something. Vijay Krishna Prabhu, if you could wait one second.
Yes, I can wait, no problem.
Well, just with the topic that Jessica brought up, I was thinking how there's like a Thomasic tendency which I think is like summed up with that phrase, cutting off one's nose to spite one's face. So I'll harm myself if it'll get back at you, or if I'll harm myself if it'll make a point. So, and I was thinking one devotee who was in the temple said that he, it was another, I thought of a couple examples of this, but one that sounded similar, maybe not the same, but reminded me of it, was one young man, brahmachari in the temple, said that some devotees were overloading him with services and so on, and he felt like it was just unfair. And so he said, all right, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'm not going to check my rounds then. Yeah, I'll do it. And guess what? You know what else I'm going to do? I'm not going to check my rounds. That's what he did. Kind of like, as if like he was getting back at them. Like, yeah, I'll do it, and I'll get back at you too. I'm not even going to follow the program. That seemed like a similar thing. Not the same, but.
Yeah. Thank you. Vijay Krishna Prabhu?
Yes, Amogha Prabhu, thank you very much. You're very kind. Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat Pranams.
In the purport to the text you chose for today, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about the hippies. And I often hear that Srila Prabhupada's mission it was and is also related to turning hippies into happies.
Hribo.
So based on all of this, my exact question is, what is the reason for a hippie not being a happy person?
The reason for a hippie not being a happy person? Well, Prabhupada's mentioning that that the hippies, the people of the West, are seeing their students becoming hippies despite gorgeous arrangements for university education. The Krishna consciousness movement, however, is trying to convert misguided, drug-addicted students to the service of Krishna and engage them in the best welfare activities for human society. So hippies, their whole thing was that they saw a lot of things wrong with modern civilization, and so therefore they rejected certain parts of it. Like, for example, they rejected school and work in a lot of ways, and traditional kind of...
Vietnam War also, no?
Yeah, the Vietnam War. So they saw this bad stuff going on that they didn't like, but they didn't really have something better. Everything was just kind of like, I mean, they had LSD, and they thought that if everybody took LSD, then everybody could have a transformation of heart, and then they could all live and together and love each other. But yeah, Balaram Prabhu says, how'd that work out? And it didn't. So many people, like, for example, Haight-Ashbury was like the center of like the hippie movement in San Francisco. And Haight-Ashbury was originally like, there was a lot of like LSD and everybody was like, loving each other. But then eventually people just started doing meth. And then Haight-Ashbury just became horrible, terrible. Why? Because they didn't actually have something higher. They didn't actually have a viable alternative to some of the negative aspects of modern civilization that they saw. So the Krishna consciousness movement is, like Prabhupada says, meant to convert the misguided. At that time, it was converting many misguided hippies to an actual, real, viable alternative to modern civilization and to the materialistic way of life. And so they go from being miserable with no real purpose to being happy because they're in Krishna consciousness. So.
Yes, plain living, high thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Danavari Mataji?
Yes,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Thank you. Very nice class, a nice discussion. Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
Is that okay? Thank you. My first question is, you said Kayana Vacha Manasindriya Slok Buddhyatmana Prakriti Swabhavat. So that when we offer, you said only, you mentioned that we don't, when we say it, but we should think about it and analyze or reflect that, wait, what am I offering? We only offer the good things and not bad things. So before we say the slok, we have to kind of be aware. How does that?
Well, we offer everything, but then we think, you offer all the day's activities to the Lord, and then as you're doing that, you can think you reflect on all of your activities, and you offer everything, and then you think, oh, geez, I'm going to, tomorrow I'm going to offer absolutely all of my activities to the Lord again. So I better make them good activities. And then throughout the day we can think like this, like, okay, at the end of the day, I'm going to, gather all of my activities, day's activities and thoughts and everything like that, and I'm going to offer it to the Lord. So I should make a nice offering. Mm-hmm. And then in that way during the day, one can refrain from performing certain activities which they wouldn't want to offer to the Lord. And then, but if they've done that throughout the day, then they reflect, and then they can think, okay, something to learn from tomorrow. I won't do that, or like that.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, it makes sense. And the other question I have is, I think Maitreya Prabhu mentioned about like whatever circumstances we are in, but we should not, the Krishna or Bhakti or Krishna consciousness is like constant, like satatam, like kirtanam yanto, that slok. So it's not like, even though some difficulty comes wherever we are living, it's not maybe favorable to Bhakti, but we should satat constantly, like every breath or whatever. How do we do that? Sometimes difficult situation comes, it's not favorable to Bhakti, but we have to, even in difficulty we perform. How do we do that? And sometimes it's difficult. So my question is, how can we perform even though it's difficult, it's not favorable, but we have to, for whatever reason, we have to fulfill duty, and we are there in family life or whatever, and then we just without our Bhakti. Go ahead.
One thing is that one should consider because there's difficult situations in life that aren't favorable for Krishna consciousness, but some of them we have a choice whether we want to be with, whether we want to be in those situations or not. It's not that, like for example, somebody goes to a bar, for example, their friends invite them to go drink or something like that. And so they go to the bar with their friends, and they're thinking, man, I'm having a really hard time remembering Krishna, it's like really hard to be Krishna conscious, at this bar. Well, you didn't have to go to the bar. So in a similar way, there's situations in our life that we can kind of, difficult situations that we can prevent. Therefore, so that's one thing, that's one recommendation, is that asat sanga tyag is to give up bad association as much as possible. And if we're in a difficult situation that we can't avoid, then one should think, like, for example, if one's performing their duty, one should think that this is for Krishna. Like you can remember that verse. Also, it has to do with one's sadhana outside of that situation. One should, when one is alone or, in a favorable situation for Krishna consciousness, then one should be really Krishna conscious, and one should have a really solid sadhana program. And then when difficult situations come naturally as they do in the mature world, then they'll be able to glide through them smoothly with Krishna on their mind. So, one sec, Cletus. Is that an okay answer, Dhanavara Mataji?
Yes, Prabhu. Very nice answer. You gave me both ideas, and also and I've read that when you tolerate certain things, then our tolerance power is also increases. So it's not always goody or favorable in life. So we have to just tolerance power in bhakti also increases. So that's also good tapa. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Cletus?
Yes, probably. You have time for one last sidebar. Yes, in response to the whatever you call the Western hippie movement, whatever that was, just about practically on every BTG, I noticed that in one of the Silver Gallopson pictures of Prabhupada in I think it's Tompkins Square Park in New York, he was surrounded by what you define as hippies, the people who use psychotronics, psychedelics, what I call psychomatic conscious transformation. That confirms your point, that Pada taught them the guru, Bhakti Yoga, like the only real conscious transformation is through Bhakti Yoga without toxic fallout as a result of drugs and various different paraphernalia. And that resonated with me because that picture today are his direct disciples that were in that park and underwent a true, genuine Bhakti Krishna conscious transformation, and now they run the ISKCON Center.
Yeah. Nice reflection.
Society. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, wonderful reflection, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Okay. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.